This is the Collecting Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Purse, here with your co-host, Bill Hamill.
I'm somewhat more comfortable collecting real estate than I am collecting other stuff.
This is the Collecting Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Purse, here as always with your co-host, Bill Hamill. This morning we interviewed Bridget and Lauren Murray from the Murray Group. Had a great discussion on property insurance. Bill, what'd you take away from this one?
Well, I love they point out the two most important takeaways with property insurance. It is the difference between replacement costs, which cost a little bit more money in relation to cash value. It's just a matter of being properly insured or not being properly insured, and also the importance of your tenants having renter's insurance.
Absolutely. I think every newer investor has questions about insurance, and it's one of those things that can slip down on the to-do list because it's not something that you have to get done today, but you know it's really important. It's always in the back of your mind. Hopefully this episode here will answer some of those questions you might have. We have Bridget and Lauren Murray from the Murray Group here today to talk about insurance, specifically insuring real estate investment portfolios. How did you two get into the real estate business?
So we actually have two very different stories on how we got into it, right? So my father, Jim, started this agency in 1974, and we would, as kids, come in and kind of play around and look at the systems and get a little acquainted with what he was doing. But I was actually a senior in college, and a recruiter came on campus from the largest insurance brokerage in the world. It's called Marsh. And I accepted a position in like December of my senior year to be a broker for Marsh, having really no idea what it was all about. But then once I got involved, what I was doing was actually working on some of the largest real estate portfolios in the country, brokering insurance for risks in like California and Florida, where you have these major catastrophic events. And then from Marsh, I became an underwriter with AIG and Chubb, and again, specializing there on earthquake coverage, flood coverage for these massive real estate portfolios, the biggest real estate owners in the country, and working on their specific portfolios. And then I came back here to Albany in 2011 and started working with a family again. And here at the Murray Group, we insure a ton of habitational risks. We are one of the largest writers of habitational risks in this area. And I just found that it felt much more impactful working with the individual, the small business owner who owns these properties and seems to be just much more invested in it than working with these risk managers at these huge companies where they're kind of just doing a job for somebody else. They're not in it day to day, really protecting their own risk. So I have found it so much more rewarding to be involved with real estate property owners in a small insurance agency versus like in the very large one.
Very interesting. Bridget,
yeah.
I want to ask you, and then we'll get to you, Lauren, with your background as well. Was your father influential getting you into that big company, knowing that he's been in this since 1974, and you went out working on these massive portfolios, these huge losses, and that's what you learned quickly? Was that something that he was influential getting you in, so you were just learning from drinking from a fire hose, so to speak?
I mean, he was not influential in that actual job position. Like, I just got lucky that one day when I met with that recruiter. But I will say, like, having grown up around insurance and seeing how happy he was in the industry, he owned some of his own real estate, just seeing the kind of living he made, how he was able to provide for us. That was the part that was influential for me.
Awesome. Lauren, how'd you get in?
So I actually got my master's degree in journalism. I wanted to be a sports reporter, like on the sidelines, announcing at games and stuff like that. And I moved down to New York City after I graduated from the Newhouse School at Syracuse University to pursue that. But it was taking forever to find a job, and the pay was absolutely nothing. So Bridget actually connected me with a job at the Marsh in New York City, working for what they call their casualty department. Casualty is liability and workers' comp for these huge firms. So I was working on accounts like Major League Baseball and the United Nations, to the scale that no one around here would ever write accounts that large. But I learned a lot there. But I eventually got sick of living in New York City, and I moved home to Albany. I actually went and worked for Rose and Kiernan for a little bit, which are our competitors, just because my dad did not have enough work for me. And then about 6 months later, he said, "Hey, I really need your help." So I came over and started working in the personal lines department. So Bridget works in the commercial lines department. I work in the personal lines department. And in terms of the real estate business, what that means for your insurance is 1 to 4 units is considered personal insurance, and anything above 4 units is going to be commercial insurance. So I work on, 2 families, 3 families, 4 families mostly, and Bridget does the larger accounts. But the Murray Group's bread and butter typically is we write a ton of habitational risks in the Albany area, mostly to, the 2 to 4 families. We also write the large complexes too, but there's just not that many of them around here.
So you both have experience working for enterprise level insurance needs, large transactions, large companies. You're working with an employee who has a manager who doesn't own the company. How has that helped you with what you do today in what we call small Albany, working directly with these owners who might have a small real estate portfolio?
So I think that we have learned kind of what their needs are, the kind of information that they're looking for to maybe take to their boss, or just what these individual owners need to be successful at what they're doing. So, we've been on both sides of it, right? We've worked with the guy who's reporting to somebody else, and we've worked with the guy who owns the property. And so, usually when you're working with the guy who works for somebody else or the girl who works for somebody else, like, we do know that it does behoove you to have the owner involved in that conversation. It just lends to a more successful transaction and creation of an insurance program when you can talk to the owner, understand exactly what it is the owner's concerns are, what keeps them up at night, so you can speak directly to that. And I think, just based on our experience, we definitely have the ability to do that.
And differentiating, Bridget, you being in the commercial side, and Lauren, you're on that residential side, and you explained it a little bit, but that commercial side, you may not even be talking with the property owner. Where the residential, is it fair to say that you're normally dealing with that owner directly? What are the differences with those conversations? The guy or the girl with the 2-family just getting started, or that guy or girl who's insuring that 50-unit commercial multifamily?
So I can only really speak to the personal side of it. But I just know that there are so many different types of property owners. There's the young person who's just getting into it and really doesn't care too much about the insurance. It takes a lot of education to get them up to speed, help them understand the importance of insurance. And then the flip side, maybe you have a landlord who owns 60 units, 32 families, and is a contractor and likes to do all of the work on his own houses. So he might buy a totally different kind of policy. So there's many different types of property owners out there. And really the key is just education first and foremost, and figuring out what exactly the landlord is trying to do in purchasing the insurance and what, like Bridget said, what keeps them up at night.
You mentioned that new investor who needs that education to learn about insurance. What are some of the things that you're going to teach them right away?
Okay. The first thing that most people lead with is price, right? Everybody is concerned about how much their policy is going to cost them. And at the end of the day, I can sell you a policy that would cost $500, but if you had a loss, you're going to sue me because I sold you a policy that gave you no coverage. So it's really helping the landlord understand that the couple of $100 that they save could cost them thousands of dollars at the time of a loss. And a lot of, most of the time people understand that. But it definitely takes convincing sometimes to help young people understand that purchasing insurance is not just a mandatory thing required by their bank, that it's really in their best interest to have it because they really would like to protect their investment in the case of a loss.
So I'm assuming that's the same situation, whether it be a residential policy or a commercial policy, where you have that homeowner that wants that dirt cheap policy, doesn't think anything's ever going to happen, just doesn't want to spend a lot of money. But then you have someone who wants a great policy because they want to be properly insured. Can you explain the differences when someone does have a loss, some of those differences with the inexpensive in relation to that more comprehensive policy?
Sure. So there's really going to be two main differences in policies that are going to make them cheaper versus more expensive. The first is going to be the coverage form. Okay, there are three main types of coverage forms on a landlord policy. We're talking 1 to 4 units here. Okay, the first one is going to just basically give you fire, wind, and hail, and that's going to be your cheapest coverage form. The second form is called Form 2, is going to add in coverage for pipes bursting, pipes leaking, okay, so interior water damage, but it's not going to give coverage for damage for water coming from the roof, like water seepage. So that's going to be a little bit more expensive than Form 1. And then Form 3 is going to give coverage for water seepage. So, snow sitting on the roof gets into the eaves of the house, comes down, and your kitchen cabinets fall off your walls, or you see the spots in your ceiling because snow is sitting on your roof or rain-driven water is getting in. So that's called a Form 3. Okay, so it's going to be fire, wind, hail, theft, vandalism, pipes bursting, your roof leaking. That's going to be the most expensive coverage form that you can buy. The second factor in pricing is really called replacement cost coverage versus actual cash value coverage. So actual cash value coverage means you're going to be penalized at the time of a loss. Okay, so if you are choosing to insure your building for only 50% of the cost to rebuild it, if it burns down, then you're only going to collect 50% of the damages at the time of a loss. So if you have a $100,000 fire loss, and you've only chosen to insure your home to 50% of the cost to rebuild it, you're not going to get $100,000 minus your deductible to repair that kitchen fire. You're only going to get $50,000 minus your deductible. Okay, so that's going to be less expensive. And then the more expensive version is called replacement cost coverage, and that's going to be the cost to rebuild the house if it were to burn down. In this local market, it's typically going to cost a lot more to rebuild your house than what you're buying it for on the market. Okay, so sometimes the numbers seem kind of out of whack, but they do make sense. And that means in that $100,000 kitchen fire, you're going to be paid $100,000 minus your $1,000 deductible or $2,500 deductible, whatever you have. So that's going to be slightly more expensive than actual cash value. So it usually is going to boil down to coverage form and replacement cost or actual cash value coverage.
Cash value versus replacement cost, that's a big one.
Yes.
I work with Bridget for my insurance. I've learned all these great tips and tricks. The Murray Group's very helpful. But Bill, as a seasoned investor, have you had any experiences with the difference between cash value and replacement cost?
I sure have. So back in probably 1996, 97, I was young and cheap and just didn't want to spend a lot on money or spend a lot on insurance, excuse me. And my agent at the time, he just wrote the policy, understanding that I just wanted to save. I don't recall getting any real guidance with that. Ultimately, I had a house fire and I had cash value coverage. I didn't know any better. We're having a fire and I know I'm insured. I don't think that there's any problem. I was probably 24, 25 and just not very far along in the business. And what I did learn was, and I didn't require tenants to get renter's insurance at this point. I didn't even know what renter's insurance was. Fortunately, the tenant was in her 50s and she had renter's insurance. Her son was smoking in the bedroom, caused a structural fire. And I found out, very fortunately, that my $50,000 policy covered, but I had like a $70,000 loss. And for a day, I was very concerned. But shortly after learning that renter's policy was going to complement my policy and make me whole. So I got very, very lucky. And then at that point, I started learning more and more about properly insuring yourself. And over the last 10 years, I've had a couple very, very large losses. And I would have taken a bath if I only had the cash value.
Yes.
Wait, so I have to get the right kind of insurance myself, and then renters have to get their own insurance? Bridget, do you want to discuss that a little more?
Yeah, so we tell all of our clients who own units, right, that their tenants should have renter's insurance. So it might cost them, depending on how much contents coverage they buy, it could cost as little as $100 for the year to buy renter's insurance, okay? The renter's insurance protects them and it protects you. So if there is some type of a fire that is caused by one of your contractors, let's say, you are not responsible as the landlord for their contents coverage. They are going to get coverage through only a renter's insurance policy. So if they are concerned about losing clothes, losing TVs, tables, things like that, they need to buy renter's insurance. The other piece, the crucial piece of the policy that they're going to get that protects you is liability. So we always recommend that tenants carry at least $300,000 of liability coverage. If you could do more, great, but at a minimum, $300,000. So the point of that is that if they do cause a fire, like what happened with you, Bill, their policy will actually pay for their property damage that they've caused. So it might start with Bill's policy, a claim going in, that Bill's policy paying that, but the insurance company is going to subrogate or go back to the renter's insurance carrier to recoup any expenses paid.
Yeah, I've learned so much through this business, through pain. And I also managed properties for other people, other owners at one point. And it's up to the owners. And I guess as the manager, I should have been a little bit more helpful, saying how important renter's insurance is. Don't just get your homeowner's insurance or your commercial policy insurance. Let's make it mandatory for your tenants to get renter's insurance. I had a client who had a loss in an apartment, and it was the second floor apartment, kitchen fire, and the most damage happened in the apartment below. So this was just an innocent bystander living in the first floor apartment who just got crushed with water. Now, they don't have renter's insurance. We're out on the front lawn with the Red Cross and all the other people who show up when you have a loss. And we're educating this gentleman, basically saying, you don't have renter's insurance? And he's like, well, no big deal. You're going to take care of me. This isn't my fault. Wow. This guy was irate, and he just went up and down on me because it's my fault that he just lost all his belongings and doesn't have anywhere to go. Talk about an impactful reason why we should make our tenants get renter's insurance.
Yeah. And another important point to the renter's insurance is that you want to make sure as the landlord that their policy stays active. So the policy can cancel because they fail to pay the renewal bill or they fail to pay, a monthly installment. But if you require your tenants to name you as an additional interest on that renter's insurance policy, you will receive notifications of a policy cancellation. Okay. So that way you can go back to your tenant and say, hey, you better re-up your policy or else, there's going to be some type of a repercussion because we require our tenants to have renter's insurance.
And almost all of the property management softwares, which you should be using, have a function where renters can upload their renter's insurance. You can even make it so that they can't pay their rent if they don't have proof of renter's insurance on there. So that's something that should be added to what you're doing every month with your new tenants and your existing tenants.
Let me ask you, okay.
Now, I want to make a point. So while the renter's insurance is really super important, it's similar to, having a contractor come to your property. If you have a roofer coming, somebody is taking care of your snow removal, lawn care, you're going to want to make sure that contractor also has insurance. You're going to ask for a certificate of insurance, which should actually say the date on it that you've requested it. You don't want to accept an old certificate of insurance. A certificate of insurance is proof that the policy is valid on that particular day. And you as the landlord are going to want to be named additional insured. That protects you in the case that they cause some type of a claim or a loss situation. Their policy will pay before yours does if you are additional insured. So that's something we tell, whether it's the guy who owns 2 units or the guy who owns 50. That's a super important part of your overall risk management program.
It's funny you mentioned the business insurance. It ties right in with the insurance policies for the landlords. We hire contractors all the time, and just over the last couple of days, I dealt with this, and this is super common. You get that solo entrepreneur who is going to do cleaning for me. And I say, are you properly insured? They give me the liability policy. What about the workers' comp? Oh, we don't need that. At that point, we have a back and forth on, well, for me to be comfortable and for me to be covered in case of a worst case scenario, you do need workers' comp. This particular cleaning company then engaged with their insurance company. Their insurance company told her, no, you don't need workers' comp. I don't know what that property owner's concern is. And this has been a frustration for years, where I've realized if I don't get proper workers' comp from that contractor, I get an audit on my payroll, and then I'm punished because I hired somebody not properly insured.
Right. Then that is a common frustration, Bill. And it's, you can buy insurance, workers' compensation insurance on yourself if you are a sole proprietor. It is possible, and it's actually a great thing that you're requiring them to do that. You don't want to get sued because of something that happens to your contractor. You want them to be able to go to their own workers' compensation policy and collect. And like you said, it gets picked up all the time by auditors. If you don't provide proof of workers' comp for your subs, you are going to get charged for it. So, sometimes it doesn't make sense to work with that entrepreneur. Sometimes it just makes sense to pay a little bit more for the bigger guy who is fully insured and has an active workers' comp policy.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, it is the way it is, and we do always recommend, too, that you have a tight contract with any contractors that you have coming onto the property. Something to protect yourself, so that they are responsible for any type of a claim or a loss that could be brought against you.
A lot of good information there. Bridget and Laura, I know you're busy. I want to let you get back to helping the Capital District stay insured. Bill, do you want to wrap this one up?
All right. This is the Collecting Real Estate podcast, and they say you have to have 3 of something to make a collection. So we've got 3 questions to wrap it up. And you may have touched on a lot of this stuff because you guys hit the big takeaways on the importance of cash value and replacement cost and that renter's insurance. But is there anything else that is very, very important since you have been insuring real estate on the commercial or residential side?
I'm going to say finding an agent who you trust and who has the right insurance companies is very important in terms of the insurance purchasing process. There are several independent agents out there. We don't all represent the same companies, but there are certain companies who have better rates than others and, who kind of specialize in the space that you guys are in. So finding an agent who has the Vermont Mutual, the Erie and Niagara, the companies who really are the most competitive and who understand the risk is very important.
Yeah, me and Stephen were talking about this before you came on, and I look at it not only being properly insured, but having great service is hugely important, which I've found. And the one question that I had come to mind is when someone has a house fire, who's the first person they're going to call? They're going to call their insurance agent, first of all, of course, knowing that they have insurance, but saying, okay, I'm having a house fire. Let's first make sure that my policy is up to date. Second question in our series of 3 here, it gets personal. What are your 1 to 2 year personal goals? What else do you guys have going on outside this busy insurance business?
We both are raising young families. So we are twins, right? And our kids are the exact same age too. Imagine that, 2 twins pregnant at the same time. Drove the rest of our family members crazy. But, for me, it's really just about making sure that my kids stay healthy and that, they're just growing and happy children. That's going to be my biggest goal outside of this.
Awesome. Last question for you. How can we and the listeners assist you, and how do we contact you?
So you can contact us. We actually just changed our phone number. It's super easy to remember. It's 518-777-7777. All 7s. Okay. So you can contact us by phone. And then our emails are very easy too. Mine is just Bridget@murraygrp.com. Lauren is Lauren@murraygrp.com. We are all over social media. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. You can contact us there. So there's plenty of ways to contact us. And, the way that you can help us is to, when you give us a call, be very honest and forthcoming with information. And it's always helpful too if you have a copy of your current policy. We just like to see that. We like to know kind of how you've been purchasing your insurance. We want to make sure we never give you less than you currently have.
How do you get the Lucky 7 phone number? Is there someone to call for that?
Yeah, actually, there is a local attorney, right, who has some of the greatest phone numbers in the area. His name is Paul Harding. He's a good friend, and he gifted us the phone number. Unbelievably, love it. It's been a blessing that he gifted us that.
Yeah, they're master marketers, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's funny you bring up that policy. People being honest with you. And if I have a policy and I'm thinking about shopping it out to another company, and you request your current policy, I'm always thinking, well, I don't want to show that agent what I'm paying, because if they can save me money, they're not gonna, because they know that I'm paying this. Do people get concerned that way?
Yes.
It's frustrating to deal with because normally you're doing business with us because you've been referred to us by somebody who you trust. And so we don't want to waste your time and our time if we can't be competitive, because we know that for the same coverage, you're probably not going to pay more. So it really just comes down to, you have to get off on the right foot. There has to be trust to begin with. We want to keep you as clients forever. So I'm not going to give you anything but my best to build that trust. And, at the end of the day, no one's going to pay more. So we don't want to waste your time. We don't want to waste our time quoting something that we just can't help you with.
Awesome. We know that we can find you guys on all the social media platforms. You gave us that 777 number. Lauren, do you have an email that listeners can contact you?
Sure. It's LAUREN at MURRAYGRP.com. So Lauren at MurrayGRP.com.
Fantastic. We appreciate you guys coming on.
Thank you for having us.
All right.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks again.